fellow Trollops. I'm here with the fourth and final of my installment of Phineas Redux, read-along conducted by Steve Donoghue of the fourth of Anthony Trollope's Pallister novels, Phineas Redux, published in 1874. This is chapters 61 to 80, going from, the beginning of the trial all the way to the conclusion, aptly named conclusion. So as we left it, it was 2 days before the trial, I think was the name of that chapter. And like Phineas was going into the trial. So we have the trial and, it's like, wow, things aren't looking good for Phineas. It looks like, everyone believes he's guilty. All the circumstantial evidence points towards him, Could he go to the chair? Well, not the chair. I think he would get hung in this case. But no. Madame Max Goesler, of course, comes to the rescue, traveling to the continent and hunting down a fellow who had made a key for the other suspect in the thing, the Bohemian Jew turned preacher, Christian preacher, the Reverend Emilius, or Mr. Emilius, I think, as he starts getting known now, and finds out that he's indeed made a key for his lodgings to be able to let himself in and out without anyone else noticing, which of course thus raises lets him become more of a potential suspect. And also a little boy discovers another of these life preservers, basically a leather covered thing you can whack people over the head with, which is what they think beat in the head of poor Mr. Bonteen, the murder victim in this case. And so what happens is, yes, that with this little bit of kind of evidence saying, hey, it could be Mr. Emilius, things flip again, and Phineas Finn gets off. He is declared innocent. Everyone suddenly is like, oh, we never thought you were guilty. It suddenly switches to Mr. Emilius, the Jew. It wasn't the Irish Roman Catholic. It was the Jew that did it. And that's, so, we get that. It's interesting in the reactions. We have a very intense chapter called I Hate Her, where Lady Laura is just like, instead of like, it's interesting, instead of being like super thrilled that, Phineas Finn is getting off, she's really pissed that Madame Goesler is the agent of his salvation, of his rescue from being hung as a murderer. It's really interesting. Like, there's that kind of level of, Trollope, it's in a book where you kind of, you jump from person to person. Trollope is really good at showing, how we are all very individual little islands that have our own very individual, some oftentimes selfish perspectives on things. And Lady Laura, poor miserable Lady Laura, is really enraged that she has been scooped by Madame Max Goesler, and that, well, obviously now he's going to marry her instead of me. It could have been me if I'd only kind of, why wasn't I going to the continent and doing that? It's interesting to see where Phineas Finn is at this point. He is, as they say, has been holding himself up very well throughout this whole thing. Very kind of noble. I talked about in the last section where it was like, look, I don't care if the men on the jury find me innocent. I want the country to find me innocent. That to know that there's no way I could have ever done something like this. And it's interesting. Once that hurdle is thing and it kind of, there's a flip and he's found innocent, he rather kind of breaks down. It's like this has been a 6 or 7 week kind of like period from him being arrested to the trial and all that. And it's like, it tells on him. He is really broken down by the end of this. He withdraws from society. He doesn't really want to see all these people. He doesn't want to be like the object of curiosity, even though, his friends are like, look, you're going to be the object of curiosity for like an afternoon, and then people are going to go on. They're going to find something else to do. And it's interesting. It's just notable exactly how much he is embittered by the fact that all these people would find him, would consider that he could have done the thing. Even like the legal profession, like, how dare you prosecute me in something like this? That you should know that I'm an honorable man, even though, or even like, especially like someone like Mr. Monk, who Mr. Monk said like, look, I support you and I believe you, and we're going to have the trial and that will exonerate you. But he, Mr. Monk kind of comes at it a very kind of there's a rational, measured thing which kind of comes with Mr. Monk, that he says, like, look, is it within the realm of possibility that you could have lost your temper and bashed in somebody's head? I think that's within the realm of everybody. I think that's within the realm of myself, that in certain circumstances that could have happened. So it's good to have a trial, good to have a disinterested thing to kind of go through and figure out, did you do it or not? And indeed, the trial went through that, and through some rather extraordinary measures. But even if Madame Max hadn't done that, there was also this little boy that, now with the evidence would have come too late. That's a good question. And, it's not to say that innocent men don't get convicted of crimes they didn't do, but for the most part, we have this rational way of doing things. But Phineas Finn, there's a part of him is like, you aren't a true friend if you don't just automatically believe me, which, I don't know, you do need those kind of friends, the unconditional love friends, like, I love you, and of course you couldn't have done this. But it's also good to have people like Mr. Monk, who I think has been a very good friend to someone like Phineas Finn, to say, let's be reasonable about this. I'm not going to give you my unconditional support and everything. I'm going to question you. I'm going to question the events, and that's also something valuable. And indeed, as we see through the ends of this section, Phineas Finn kind of slowly comes around to this. But at the very beginning, it's this very human kind of thing of, how could you believe that of me? And it's a good portrayal of that. It's not like he's just like, oh, I'm going to be reasonable and good natured about this. It's like, no, it really kind of cuts to the core of this guy whose main trait has been, I've been this likable fellow that everyone's always liked. And to be on the other opposite spectrum, to be considered a murderer, is a real test of his character, test of his manhood, perhaps. We have a thing of Mr. and Mrs. Lowe having a conversation. Mrs. Lowe going like, well, he hasn't really, I'm surprised he's not really maybe conducting himself as being very kind of manly in a situation like this. And, Mr. Lowe, I'm just going to pull up one little quote. Mr. Lowe defends him, and indeed the narrator kind of goes into this whole thing of what's manhood, and a part of what manhood seems to be is there's affectation, and then there's the actual thing of being a man, and that the two, all the people who pretend to be men, that's all the putting on all the affectation, that is kind of the polar opposite of being a man. And but also there's also a thing here of that if Phineas Finn wasn't such a sensitive, intelligent character, imaginative character, what they say is here is, Mrs. Lowe was wrong when she accused our hero. This is the narrator, I guess Trollope talking. Mrs. Lowe was wrong when she accused our hero of being unmanly. Had his imagination been less alert in looking into the minds of men, and in picturing to himself the thoughts of others in reference to the crime with which he had been charged, he would not now have shrunk from contact with his fellow creatures as he did. So there's also kind of a thing of Phineas Finn is actually a little bit more deeper of a character maybe now, through the process of, I'm thinking about from like the very first Phineas Finn, the first novel, to Phineas Redux. There's definitely been a passage of thing of he's more of an imaginative creature. He's someone who's like, he's looking into the minds of other men, and that sensitivity has made it hard for him to get back in. So yeah, and so there's that. There's also just I do enjoy this. There's just this good hunk of paragraph here of talking about what's manhood. Part of it is like, oh well, you women would couldn't see this. You demand affectation of manhood, where the real manhood is something else, much more deeper, which it's the misogyny of the time, I guess. So yes, we get that. We get the end of the trial, and we get as Trollope says, we get him collecting together the ends of the threads of our narrative and tying them into a simple knot, so there may be no unraveling, which is so Trollopean in his thing of, I've done all these massive threads, but we're going to spend some time here at the end not putting off everything. So Quintus Slide have tried to still prosecute Finn. Goes against Lord Chiltern, ends up getting fired from his job, gets put onto like a really lowly position in the ballot box, and is thinking about going to New York, where he can really get into the rough and scrabble in New York and probably do a really good job and become an amazing reporter there. So I'm looking forward to my Quintus, the Quintus Slide novel. See, I've got the name. I'm losing my names. Gerard Mall and Adelaide Palliser. Yeah, they get married. I'm still not convinced that this was ever really. I'm still not convinced what the hell point this plot, Mr. Spooner, Mr. Mall Senior. I still, it's just sort of it was like a little business to go around. A very kind of light business to go around the main plot, which was the Phineas Finn. Phineas Finn got to be the star of his own book in the redo. Lady Eustace does actually get to go. She ends up going off and sounds like rumored to have hooked up with Lord George Bruce Lord George de Bruce Carruthers, who that was another character from the Eustace Diamonds, who he's very kind of a Byronic kind of con man, man's man, who you really get the sense that probably will be able to kind of, as they were talking about that book, be able to handle Lady Eustace and rein her up, all the horsey metaphors you want to put in there, sexist as they are, to perhaps give her some sort of measure of peace by kind of settling her down a bit. Lady and Lord Chiltern are just chugging along, just this picture of great marriage, as Steve said, I think in like the first video, saying like, this is sort of what a lot of the other characters in the book were aspiring to. Lady Laura, where there's this little paragraph, nothing much more to be said about her. She's still living, she's still alone. She's basically a recluse living with her failing, dying father. Like the end. It's like, wow. Yeah, she really is like got to be the most kind of miserable, lonely, broken character in the book. And indeed with Phineas, of course I missed the biggest thing, because Phineas Finn does go with Madame Max Goesler. He marries her and they go off for 6 months in Italy. Now I think 1 month in Italy is pretty damn nice. So 6 months must be pretty awesome. So they get married. They're very happy. They're going to be a great couple together. And Lady Laura is sort of discarded on the side. Now, I know, Lady Laura's love for Phineas Finn was always sort of, I don't know, questionable to me, but she definitely seems to have stuck to it and been miserable and doesn't seem to see another alternative in her life. I mean, hopefully, this is the wonderful thing about Trollope novels. I can always hope for in the next 2 novels that there's going to be a little side story where Lady Laura comes out of this, shakes it off, and finds a proper, healthy relationship. But at the end of this book, she's really not happy, which I guess, it's the sort of the winners losers sort of thing that you can often get in kind of a romantic triangle. But we'll see how Trollope goes on with this. So yeah, this is Phineas Redux, and I think I kind of made fun at the very first video. It's like redo, redux, what is it? And if you think about this as a redo, it's like, yes, it's Phineas coming back, trying politics again, trying kind of his romantic luck again, after kind of having gone there, kind of wined and dined a bunch of ladies, kind of skipped to one lady to the next lady in a very kind of fairly carefree way, which made it hard for you to kind of take seriously his romantic intentions in that book, to this book where he seems like a more mature character. He goes through genuine suffering, and there's nothing like a character going through genuine suffering and kind of bearing it up well and struggling with it and perhaps overcoming it, that can endear a character to you. And I think that actually did happen in this case. So in some ways, it's Trollope also kind of, I'm going to redo the character and see if I can further develop him, further deepen him, and maybe lodge him into a reader's heart, which I think he did in my case, because I delighted in wanting to throttle Phineas in the last book as kind of this really super lucky, happy-go-lucky, super entitled hairdo. But in this book, it's like, wow, he took some knocks, and he's still like, at the end of this book, it's like, well, one will hope that he will, after he's gone, he's had his 6 months of bliss, of matrimonial honeymoon bliss with a great lady in Italy, that he'll come back and he'll re-enter politics. And you can actually believe that, and he'll come back and perhaps be a smarter, more seasoned politician, hopefully not cynical politician, because he has a much more darker view of humanity, I think, which Trollope himself seems to share of. I really do look at it as like, at the end of this book, they've not found the murderer to poor braggarty, pushy, arrogant Mr. Bonteen, who got his head bashed in. And a lot of people are like, fuck yeah, might as well. He probably deserved it one way or the other, which is like pretty dark in itself. But it's like they went, first it's Phineas Finn because we have the circumstantial evidence, and now it's like, now we think it's the Jew, Mr. Emilius, and it's like, well, and at the end of the book, tellingly, the legal system, the more objective system in this book, however imperfect it might be, has not found a murderer, and Mr. Bonteen gets convicted, but he gets convicted for bigamy. Serves his time and is let out, but there is no solution to the murderer, and you can just say, well, it must have been Mr. Emilius, is to fall into the very trap that the public fell into the first time around. And I think it's telling that Phineas Finn isn't like, I hold this against Mr. Emilius, we must convict him now. It's like, no, he kind of has gotten a bit of an idea of exactly how we are really bad at making decisions, how we have all this kind of biases and all this this stuff, which is probably also and how we judge characters, of how easily Trollope as an author is able to manipulate us through these books. This is one of the delights of these books, is he can get you just absolutely despising somebody in one chapter and thinking they're a complete butthead, or looking down on the old woman, Mrs. Halterby, the old woman who was a lover of the Duke of Omnium, and looking down upon her, and then just suddenly in a snap, it's like, wow, she's a woman that was in love with this man, but she's aged, she's gotten old, and he doesn't love her anymore, and he loves the beautiful new woman, and he doesn't even want to see her on his deathbed, and not give her that thing. It's like, there's that snap of thing of like, look, you're looking at this perspective, let's look at it from this perspective suddenly, and then, wow, think about like how narrow and how limited we are in our scope, and how something like a novel can hopefully try and open up our mind and kind of jar us away from those snap judgments, those simplistic ways of looking at things, which I think is what you get in a lot of literature. So a really good redo, Mr. Trollope, a really good redo for myself. And I look forward to redoing more of these novels later. So yes, that's Phineas Redux. I guess we'll see when the next Trollope novel comes along. I will be on the Steve Donoghue train to whatever that will be, the Duke's Children or the Prime Minister, whichever one comes next. So yes, more videos later.